Live 4,500 years ago, how they built the pyramids without machines. Before we talk about pyramids, I want you to sit with this thought. Everything you're about to see was built by people who had no machines, no shortcuts, and no guarantee they'd ever see the finished result. They just kept showing up. If you've ever felt like progress is too slow, if you've ever wondered whether your effort actually matters, this story is for you. I'm Michael Dawson at Asanwo, and this is History Maker. Pause for a second and picture this. You're standing in the Egyptian desert 4,500 years ago. No engines humming, no cranes, no computers, just sand, sun, stone, and people. And rising in front of you is something that still shouldn't exist. The Great Pyramid of Giza, 147 meters tall, over 2.3 million stone blocks, built with tools we consider primitive today. Yet it stood as the tallest human-made structure for 3,800 years. Nothing came close until the Lincoln Cathedral in 1311 CE. Think about that timeline. For nearly 4 millennia, this ancient structure held the record. Not because later civilizations lacked ambition, but because the engineering challenge was at extreme. If this was built today, with all our technology, we'd call it a monumental challenge. So how did they do it then? That's what we're exploring today. Not with theories or speculation, with evidence, with engineering, with an honest look at what humans are capable when they commit to something greater than themselves. We're going to walk through the actual process, the real constraints, the ingenious solutions, and by the end, you'll understand not just how they built it, but why it still matters. A world without machines. Let's establish the constraints clearly. No electricity, no steel tools, no modern mathematics as we know it, no pulleys in the way we use them, no wheels for heavy transport on sand, no CAD software, no laser levels, no smartphones to coordinate thousands of workers, just copper chisels that dulled quickly, wooden sledges that splintered, hemp rope that frayed, and human ingenuity operating at a scale we struggle to comprehend. Yet this structure still stands when entire civilizations have vanished. The Roman Empire, gone. The Byzantine Empire, gone. The Mongol Empire, gone. The Great Pyramid, still there, still precise, still defying easy explanation. That's not luck. That's not accident. That's intention backed by flawless execution over decades. And it is what's fascinating. We have detailed records of ancient Egyptian life, hieroglyphics, papyrus scrolls, archaeological evidence. They weren't hiding secrets. They were documenting their world. Yet the full construction methodology remains debated because the scale of coordination required seems impossible for the era. Before we ask how they built it, we need to understand something more fundamental. Why would anyone attempt this? Because without understanding the why, the how makes no sense. You don't mobilize tens of thousands of people for decades without a compelling reason. Let's examine that reason. The Egyptian world. To understand the pyramids, you need to understand ancient Egypt itself. This wasn't a struggling civilization barely surviving in the desert. This was one of the most stable, organized societies in human history. For over 3,000 years, Egyptian civilization maintained continuity. Same language, same gods, same fundamental structure. Compare that to modern history. In the last 3,000 years, we've seen countless empires rise and fall. Languages evolve and become unrecognizable. Religions shift. Political systems completely transform. But Egypt, remarkably consistent. That kind of stability creates something rare, institutional knowledge that compounds over generations. What one generation learned, the next generation improved. There was no need to reinvent everything from scratch with each new ruler. Knowledge accumulated, techniques refined, expertise deepened. The Egyptians had time, they had resources, and most importantly, they had a shared belief system that made massive projects feel necessary, not optional. Their entire worldview was built around maintaining Ma'at, cosmic order and balance. The pharaoh's job wasn't just political, it was cosmic. He was a living embodiment of divine order, maintaining balance between chaos and civilization. And when he died, ensuring his successful transition to the afterlife was quite literally a matter of universal importance. What happens when an entire society aligns around a single purpose? When individual effort is channeled toward a collective goal that everyone believes in, you get structures that last for 1,500 years. A civilization built on rhythm. Ancient Egypt moved at the pace of nature, and the rhythm of Egyptian life was dictated by one thing: the Nile. Every year, like clockwork, the Nile flooded between July and October. This wasn't a disaster. This was the foundation of their entire economy. The flood brought nutrient-rich silt from the Ethiopian highlands. Crops grew without extensive irrigation. Food was abundant. Egypt was called the gift of the Nile for good reason. The river made civilization possible in an otherwise harsh desert. But during the flood season, farming stopped. The fields were underwater. Agricultural work was impossible. So what did tens of thousands of farmers do during this time? They became builders. This wasn't slavery. This was a labor tax system called corvée labor. Think of it as a combination of civic duty and religious obligation. During the flood season, farmers would report to pyramid construction sites. They'd be fed, housed, given work that contributed to cosmic order. And critically, they'd be compensated, not with money as we know it, but with food, beer, and other provisions. Their families were taken care of while they worked. When the floods receded, they'd return to their fields for the growing season. This created a renewable workforce. Seasonal, predictable, sustainable. The pyramid construction schedule aligned perfectly with agricultural cycles. It wasn't disruptive to Egyptian society. It was integrated into it. What happens when a society stops rushing and starts aligning with natural cycles? When work happens in seasons, not in constant grind, you get sustainability, long-term planning, generational thinking, the opposite of our modern move fast and break things mentality. Who really built the pyramids? Let's clear up the biggest myth right now. The pyramids were not built by slaves. That idea came from Greek historians like Herodotus writing centuries after the pyramid were built, and it was heavily reinforced by Hollywood. But archaeology tells a dramatically different story. In the 1990s, archaeologists led by Mark Lena and Zahi Hawass discovered work of villages near the Giza Plateau. These weren't prison camps. These were organized communities with infrastructure. They found bakeries that produced thousands of loaves daily, breweries making beer, a nutritional staple, not just recreation. Beer was safer than water and provided calories, medical facilities where injured workers received treatment, cemeteries where workers were buried with honor, close to the pyramids themselves. Let's pause on that last point. If these were slaves, they wouldn't receive medical care. They wouldn't be buried near sacred structures. Slaves are expendable in ancient systems. You don't invest in their health or honor them in death. But these workers, they found evidence of workers with healed fractures, complex fractures, the kind that requires someone with medical knowledge to set properly, meaning someone set their bones and gave them time to recover. Months, potentially. That's not how you treat slaves. That's how you treat valued workers. They also found graffiti left by work gangs, teams with names like Friends of Khufu and Drunkards of Menkaure. These weren't prisoners. These were organized teams with pride in their work, with identity tied to their contributions. These were respected workers doing sacred work. They weren't forced to build. They believed in what they were building. Belief changes effort, always has. When you're building something you believe matters cosmically, physically demanding work becomes bearable, even honorable. Think about it. Would you carry a 2-ton stone block up a ramp for weeks if you thought it was just for one man's ego? Probably not. But if you believe that stone was literally holding the universe together, that your work ensured the Nile would flood next year, that cosmic order depended on your contribution, that changes everything. Why the pyramids mattered. To modern minds, the pyramids seem excessive. Why spend decades building a tomb? Why dedicate such enormous resources to one person's death? But to the Egyptians, death wasn't the end. It was a transition, a transformation. The pyramid wasn't just a tomb. It was a machine designed for immortality, a spiritual technology, if you will. The pharaoh wasn't just a king. He was a god incarnate, the living Horus, the son of Ra, the living link between humans and divine forces. His role was to maintain Ma'at, cosmic order, during his lifetime. But when the pharaoh died, cosmic order was threatened. The universe held its breath. The pyramid was designed to ensure the pharaoh's successful journey to the afterlife, where he would continue to maintain balance between chaos and order. The text described this journey in detail. The pharaoh's soul would ascend to join the gods, become a star in the sky, continue to influence the world from the divine realm. If the pyramid failed, the entire cosmic structure could collapse. Floods might not come, crops might fail, chaos might reign, the desert might swallow civilization. This wasn't superstition in their context. This was their scientific understanding of how the universe worked. Religion and science weren't separated. They were the same thing. The pyramid was engineering and theology combined, architecture and cosmology unified. That belief gave meaning to suffering. When work has purpose beyond the physical, endurance becomes possible. Think about modern contexts. People endure incredible hardship when they believe their work matters. Doctors working 36-hour shifts because lives depend on them. Parents sacrificing sleep for years because their children need them. Athletes training through pain because a goal justifies the suffering. Purpose transforms effort from burden into calling. The pyramid builders had that purpose in abundance. The engineering challenge. Now let's talk numbers. Real numbers. The Great Pyramid originally stood 146.6 meters tall. Today, after losing its smooth outer casing, it's 138.8 meters. Its base covers 13 acres. That's roughly 5.3 hectares, nearly 10 American football fields. It contains approximately 2.3 million stone blocks. The average block weighs 2.5 tons. That's about the weight of 2 cars. Some blocks, particularly in the king's chamber, weigh over 70 tons. The total weight of the pyramid is estimated at 6.5 million tons. And here's the thing that baffles engineers today. The base is leveled to within 2 centimeters across those 13 acres. Think about that. Across an area the size of 10 football fields, the variation in height is less than an inch. The sides are lined almost perfectly with true north, south, east, and west. The accuracy is within 3/60th of a degree. That's more precise than the Greenwich Observatory built thousands of years later. The 4 sides are equal in length to within 10 centimeters out of 230 meters. The angles are precise enough that modern architects still study them. The original smooth casing stones fit together so tightly you couldn't slide a piece of paper between them. All of this was accomplished without steel tools. They used copper and stone. Precision instruments as we know the modern mathematics. No decimals, no zero, no algebra. Mechanical advantage beyond simple machines. No complex pulleys or gears. This is where most people assume there must be some lost technology. Some secret we've forgotten. Ancient astronauts. Atlantean survivors. Some vanished advanced civilization. But the truth is more impressive than any mystery. They did it with organization, patience, and an understanding of basic physics applied at massive scale. No aliens needed. Just human determination and intergenerational knowledge. The stone problem. Let's start with the most obvious question. How did they move millions of blocks weighing multiple tons each? First, they had to get the stones. The stones came from quarries. Multiple locations depending on the type of stone needed. Most of the pyramid's limestone came from quarries right near Giza. Close proximity. Relatively easy transport. The Giza plateau itself is limestone bedrock. Some of the quarries were literally carved into the base of the pyramid site. The finer white limestone for the outer casing came from Chura, across the Nile, about 13 kilometers away. This limestone was prized for its quality. Fine-grained, almost marble-like, perfect for the smooth outer surface. The granite for the king's chamber came from Aswan, over 800 kilometers south. These granite blocks weighed up to 80 tons each. Each one. No machines. No motors. Remember that. So how? Transport by river. For the granite from Aswan, they used the Nile. They quarried during the flood season when the water was high, load the stones onto barges, and float them downstream. The Nile flows north. Gravity does most of the work. Genius. Barges were massive. Some estimates suggest they were over 60 meters long. Purpose-built for heavy stone transport. Water does the heavy lifting. The principle that still powers modern shipping. Transport by land. This is where it gets interesting. They didn't try to carry the stones. They dragged them on wooden sledges. Recent experiments by physicists at the University of Amsterdam confirmed something ancient paintings had been depicting for millennia. They poured water on the sand in front of the sledges. Why? Physics. Wet sand is twice as easy to drag heavy object across compared to dry sand. The water binds the sand particles together, preventing them from piling up in front of the sledge. Dry sand creates friction and builds up in front of the sledge like a wave. Wet sand firms up. The sledge glides across it much more smoothly. Simple, effective, revolutionary, and completely logical once you understand it. But it took modern scientists thousands of years to confirm what the Egyptians had figured out through trial and error. Progress doesn't require high technology. It requires understanding the fundamentals and applying them consistently. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best solution, moving the impossible. Now they've got the stones to the construction site. Next problem, how do you lift a 2.5-ton block 100 meters into the air? The answer, ramps. But not just one ramp. The ramp system had to evolve as a pyramid grew. There are several theories, and evidence suggests they probably used different approaches at different stages. Straight ramps. Early on, they might have used a straight ramp leading up one side. Simple, direct. But here's the problem. As a pyramid gets taller, a straight ramp would need to be impossibly long to maintain a reasonable incline. To maintain a 10-degree incline to reach 100 meters, you need a ramp over 500 meters long. And as the pyramid grows taller, the ramp grows longer. Eventually, you'd need more material for the ramp than for the pyramid itself. Not practical. Zigzag ramps. Ramp that switch back up the sides. More efficient than a single straight ramp. You reduce the length needed, but you create sharp turns. Difficult for moving heavy blocks. Spiral ramps, wrapping around the pyramid as it rises. This is gaining favor among researchers. French architect Jean-Pierre Houdin proposed that they use an external ramp for the bottom third, then switch to an internal spiral ramp. This explains several mysteries. How they maintained access to all sides while building. How they moved the heaviest blocks to the king's chamber high in the pyramid. Why there seem to be internal structures that serve no obvious purpose. Internal ramps. Some evidence suggests they may have built ramps inside the pyramid structure itself, filling them in as they went higher. Recent microgravity scans detected void spaces inside the pyramid that might be remnants of these internal ramps. The truth? They probably used combinations of these approaches. They adjusted constantly, rebuilt ramps, changed strategies as needed. They weren't married to one perfect plan. They adapted. Progress doesn't require perfection from the start. It requires adaptation along the way. The willingness to say, this isn't working, let's try something else without viewing it as failure. And here's what's crucial. Moving one block isn't impressive. Moving 2.3 million blocks with consistency, that's what separates remarkable from impossible. That requires systems, standards, training, quality control. Let's talk about how they organize that. The workforce organization, 23:30, 26:30. Imagine coordinating 20,000 to 30,000 workers. No radios, no phones, no project management software, no Excel spreadsheets, no Gantt charts, no Slack channels. Just human organization at a scale that modern project managers would find daunting. The worker villages show evidence of careful planning. Specialized teams. Not everyone did everything. Specialization increases efficiency. There were quarrymen who knew how to extract blocks without breaking them. Haulers who understood the physics of moving heavy objects. Ramp builders who constructed and maintained the pathways. Masons who placed blocks with precision. Tool makers who kept copper chisels sharp. Surveyors who maintained alignment. Engineers who solved problems as they arose. And massive support staff. Bakers, brewers, butchers, medical personnel, administrators. Shifts and rotations. Workers rotated through different tasks. This prevented burnout and distributed knowledge. No single person knew everything, but the system knew everything. Knowledge was distributed across the workforce. Food supply chains. Feeding 20,000 plus people daily required industrial-scale food production. Archaeologists found evidence of bakeries producing thousands of loaves, breweries making nutritional beer, and butcheries processing cattle and fish. The logistics of feeding this workforce rivals the logistics of moving the stones. Some estimates suggest they consumed 4,000 pounds of meat per day, every day, for decades. That requires supply chains, farms, transportation, storage, housing. Workers weren't sleeping in the desert. They had barracks, organized sleeping quarters, community spaces. They found evidence of recreational areas, places where workers could rest and socialize. This wasn't a brutal work camp. It was a functioning city. Administrative systems. They had written records, papyrus documents tracking deliveries, work teams, rations. Someone was managing logistics, tracking progress, coordinating schedules. This was a city dedicated to one purpose, and it worked because everyone understood their role in the larger system. What modern organizations struggle with, the ancient Egyptians mastered, aligning thousands of people toward a single goal. How do you get 30,000 people to work together effectively without modern communication tools? You create clear roles, shared purpose, visible progress. You build culture, not just structures, precision without technology. Now let's talk about something that still puzzles engineers. The precision. The Great Pyramid aligns with true north to within 3/60th of a degree. That's more accurate than the Greenwich Observatory built thousands of years later. The base is level across 13 acres to within 2 centimeters. The 4 sides are equal in length to within 10 centimeters. The original casing stones were cut so precisely they fit together with gaps thinner than a human hair. How did they achieve this without laser levels or GPS? Alignment with true north. They used the stars. Specifically, they used the circumpolar stars that never set below the horizon. They built a circular wall, fill it with water to create a level surface, and track the reflection of stars. By marking the rising and setting positions of circumpolar stars and bisecting the angle, they could establish true north with remarkable precision. Patient, methodical, accurate. Leveling the base, they likely used water channels. Cut shallow channels into the bedrock, fill them with water, and mark the water level. Water always finds level. Physics doesn't lie. They'd have a perfect level reference across the entire base. Then they'd cut the bedrock to match those marks. Simple physics, brilliant application, measuring and maintaining right angles. They used tools called set squares and plumb bobs. Combined with rope stretch taut, they could maintain precise angles. They also used the 3-4-5 triangle principle. If you have a triangle with sides of 3, 4, and 5 units, the angle opposite the longest side is always 90 degrees. This is called a Pythagorean triple. The Egyptians used it centuries before Pythagoras. Shadows and time. They used the sun shadow to measure and maintain alignment. Solar noon provided a daily reference point. By tracking the sun's shadow throughout the day and marking its shortest length, they could establish a perfect north-south line. Measuring tools. They had standard units of measurement. The royal cubit, about 52.4 centimeters. They had measuring rods marked with precise divisions. These were standardized across the kingdom. Quality control depended on standardization. No rushing, no guessing, no assuming. They measured, verified, remeasured, then proceeded. If something was wrong, they fixed it before moving forward. Better to take extra time than to compound errors. Precision comes from patience, not from technology. Technology speeds up the process, but precision has always required care. The ancient Egyptians understood. Measure twice, cut once. Or in their case, measure 100 times, place once. The knowledge transfer, one of the most impressive aspects, knowledge continuity. The Egyptians didn't just build one pyramid and call it a day. They built dozens, over hundreds of years, and each generation learned from the previous one. The earliest pyramids, failed experiments. The Pyramid of Giza, step pyramid, revolutionary for its time, but structurally different, built around 2650 BC. It was the first large-scale stone structure. Prior to this, most buildings were mud brick. The architect Imhotep figured out how to stack stone mastabas, rectangular tomb structures, in diminishing sizes. A breakthrough in architectural thinking. The Pyramid of Madam attempted to fill in the steps to create smooth sides. Partially collapsed. They learned that you can't just fill in steps. The structure needs different engineering. The bent pyramid, They changed the angle mid-construction. Started at 54 degrees, then shifted to 43 degrees. Why? They realized the initial angle was too steep. The structure was becoming unstable. Cracks appeared. Rather than collapse the whole thing, they adapted, changed the angle, finished it. It looks strange, but it stands. The Red Pyramid, first successful smooth-sided pyramid, used a shallow 43-degree angle from the start. This was their proof of concept. They'd figured it out. Then came the Great Pyramid, the culmination of decades of accumulated knowledge. All the lessons learned, all the failures corrected, all the innovations combined. This was ingenious appearing out of nowhere. This was iterative improvement over generations. And here's what's crucial. They documented their work. Later pyramid builders referenced earlier designs, copied successful techniques, avoided known problems. Institutional knowledge accumulated. Mastery isn't born. It's accumulated through repeated attempts and transferred knowledge. This is how human progress actually works. We stand on the shoulders of giants, each generation building on what came before. The pyramids are a perfect example of this principle in action. Why the pyramids still stand. Let's talk about why these structures lasted when so many others didn't. The pyramids weren't rushed. They weren't cheapened. They weren't built for applause. They were built to last forever. Material choice, limestone and granite. Naturally durable. Resistant to erosion. Limestone from Giza is relatively soft when first quarried. Easier to cut and shape. But as it ages and the moisture evaporates, it hardens, becomes incredibly durable. Granite from Aswan is one of the hardest stones available. It doesn't erode easily. For the king's chamber, where structural integrity was critical, they used granite. Smart material selection for specific purposes. Structural design. The pyramid shape is inherently stable. The weight distributes downward and outward. There's no single point of catastrophic failure. Even if the outer casing falls away, which it did over millennia, the core structure remains stable. The pyramid is essentially a mountain made of stone, and mountains are stable. Foundation work. They didn't just start piling stones. They leveled and prepared the bedrock. They carved into the bedrock itself. The pyramid isn't sitting on sand. It's integrated with the bedrock. Some of the lower courses are actually carved out of the natural stone of the plateau. They built on solid ground. Literally, precision construction. Because everything was measured carefully, the blocks fit tightly. No major structural weaknesses. The tight fit means weight distributes evenly. No stress concentrations. No weak points. Mass. The sheer mass of the structure provides stability. 6.5 million tons doesn't move easily. Earthquakes happen in Egypt. The pyramids barely notice. Compare this to modern buildings. We build for 50, maybe 100 years. Then we demolish and rebuild. We optimize for cost and speed, not longevity. Planned obsolescence is standard. We use steel and concrete, which corrode and degrade over decades. The Egyptians optimized for eternity. They weren't thinking about next quarter's profit margins. They were thinking about forever. And 4,500 years later, we're still trying to understand how they did it. Speed fades. What lasts is built slowly and built right. What are we building today that will still stand in 4,500 years? Probably not much. Our approach to construction has fundamentally changed. Not necessarily for the better. What this means for modern life. You may not move stone blocks, but you are building something. A career, a family, a body of work, a reputation, a legacy. The pyramids remind us of principles that transcend time. Purpose drives endurance. When work matters beyond the immediate, suffering becomes bearable. The pyramid builders endured decades of hard physical labor because they believed it mattered cosmically. What do you believe in strongly enough to endure for? Organization multiplies effort. Individual strength is limited. Organized collective effort is nearly limitless. One person can't build a pyramid, but 30,000 people organized effectively can achieve the impossible. How are you leveraging collective effort? Precision requires patience. Rushing creates problems that take longer to fix than doing it right the first time. The Egyptians spent enormous time on preparation, measurement, and verification. Result? Structures that lasted millennia. Where in your life are you rushing when you should be measuring? Adaptation beats perfection. They didn't have a perfect plan from day one. They adjusted as they learned. The bent pyramid is proof they were learning as they went. Are you willing to adapt when your initial plan isn't working? Legacy thinking changes everything. When you're building for generations, not just for yourself, your standards change. Short-term thinking creates short-term results. Long-term thinking creates enduring impact. What are you building that will outlast you? Shared belief creates shared effort. The Egyptians built together because they believed together. Their shared cosmology created shared purpose. What belief system aligns your efforts with others? Excellence requires time. You can't rush mastery. You can't speed up expertise. 20 to 30 years to build one pyramid. That's commitment to excellence. Where are you trying to rush something that requires time? You don't need perfect tools. You need commitment. You don't need unlimited resources. You need clarity about what matters. You don't need genius. You need consistency over time. History isn't made by convenience. It's made by people who refuse to let difficulty stop them. The pyramid builders faced obstacles we can barely imagine. No technology, extreme climate, massive scale, generational timelines. And they built something that's still standing after empires rose and fell around it. What's your excuse? The human element. Here's what moves me most about the pyramids. They prove something about humanity that we often forget. When we align around something greater than ourselves, when we commit to a shared vision, when we combine individual effort into organized action, we can do things that seem impossible. 4,500 years ago, without any of our modern advantages, people built structures that still inspire awe. Not because they were superhuman, because they were committed. Every block place was an act of faith. Faith that their work mattered. Faith that cosmic order depended on their effort. Faith that future generations would remember. And they were right. We're still talking about them, still studying their work, still trying to understand how they achieved what they did. The pyramids are more than ancient monuments. They are messages across time. Messages that say, we were here, we mattered, we built something that would outlast us. And 4,500 years later, we're receiving that message. Think about that. Right now, you and I are having a conversation about people who lived 4,500 years ago. We don't know their names, most of them. We don't know their individual stories. But we know they existed. We know they committed. We know they achieved something extraordinary. What are you committed to that's bigger than yourself? What are you building that will outlive you? What message are you sending to the future? Because whether you realize it or not, you're building something. Your choices today are creating ripples that will extend beyond your lifetime. The only question is, what kind of ripples? The pyramids remind us that ordinary humans can achieve extraordinary things. Not through magic, not through aliens, not through lost technology, through commitment, organization, time, shared purpose. That's available to all of us. The question is whether we're willing to commit. The mathematical mystery. Let's address something controversial, the mathematical precision. Some people claim the pyramids encode advanced mathematical knowledge. Pi, phi, the golden ratio, advanced geometry. Is this true? Partially. The ratio of the pyramid's perimeter to its height approximates 2 pi. The slope angle of 51.84 degrees creates specific mathematical relationships. But here's the question, was this intentional or coincidental? Did the Egyptians know advanced mathematics, or did they discover practical ratios through trial and error? The honest answer, we don't know for certain. What we do know, the Egyptians were skilled mathematicians. They had sophisticated understanding of geometry. They could calculate areas and volumes. They understood ratios and proportions. The Rhine mathematical papyrus shows they worked with fractions, linear equations, and geometric problems. But they didn't have our mathematical notation. No algebra, no decimals. They solved problems practically, not abstractly. It's entirely possible that through experimentation across multiple pyramids, they discovered ratios that worked structurally and looked proportionally pleasing. And those ratios happened to approximate mathematical constants. Not because they were encoding secrets, but because certain proportions are simply optimal. Nature uses these same proportions. The golden ratio appears in shells, flowers, galaxies. Not because nature is doing math, but because these proportions emerge naturally from physical constraints. The Egyptians may have discovered similar principles through practical experience. Sometimes the most mysterious explanations are unnecessary. Simple explanations combined with extraordinary execution often accomplish what seems impossible. We don't need lost civilizations or ancient aliens to explain the pyramids. We need to give ancient humans the credit they deserve. The pyramids are still standing because people refuse to stop. They face impossible logistics and solved them. They face physical limitations and worked within them. They faced generational timelines and trusted the process. And 4,500 years later, their work is still teaching us that humans are capable of extraordinary things when we align around shared purpose, organize our efforts strategically, commit to excellence over convenience, think in generations, not quarters, trust the process even when we can't see the end, measure carefully before proceeding, adapt when strategies aren't working, value legacy over immediate recognition. The next time you face something that feels impossible, remember, people with less move more, people with fewer tools built bigger, people with shorter lifespan thought longer, not because they were different, because they decided that difficulty wasn't a reason to stop. It was just part of the process. They didn't wait for perfect conditions. They didn't wait for better technology. They didn't wait for someone else to solve it. They worked with what they had, figured out what they didn't know, built systems that worked, and executed for decades. Final thought, the pyramids aren't just ancient monuments. They are proof of what's possible when humans refuse to accept limitations as final answers. They are evidence that commitment matters more than convenience. They are demonstrations that time plus effort plus organization equals a seemingly impossible. And they are reminders that what we build today will speak for us long after we're gone. What are you building that will still be standing 4,500 years from now? Probably not a physical structure, but your ideas, your contributions, your impact on others, those can last just as long. If you build them with the same care, precision, and commitment as the pyramid builders. If this shifted how you think about what's possible, subscribe. This channel is about understanding how real achievements happen, not through magic or shortcuts, through commitment, organization, and time, through learning from the past to build better futures, through recognizing that humans have always been capable of extraordinary things. We're just getting started. And if you found value in this deep dive into ancient engineering and human capability, hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to remember what humans are truly capable of when we commit. Because the world needs more people thinking like pyramid builders. Long-term, patient, precise, committed. We'll see you in the next one. If this story found you when you needed it, share it with someone who's still finding their way. Not because it's about pyramids, but because it's about persistence. If you believe history is more than dates and monuments, and that every struggle carries a lesson worth learning, subscribe and stay with us. We don't just study the past here. We learn how to rise from it. I'm Michael Dawson Adesanwo. And remember, your fall is not your finish.